Hi, and welcome to Wake Up Canada News. I'm Brad Wilder. Thanks for being here today. Very special guest in the studio with us, a gentleman who has a lot of worldly experience. We're going to let him get to some of those details about his past, his present, and his future. An 89-page report that came out from this individual, and it is not only intriguing, but it is also leads to criminal. And I think that this 89-page report could be considered to be something similar to The Pelican Brief, if you've seen that movie with Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington. This particular bit of information has that kind of power to it. I'd like you to please welcome Ken Drysdale. Ken, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for asking me.
Ken, tell us about your perspective on I guess on your past first off, and your your experience and everything that you've kind of done to get yourself to a place where this 89-page report came to be.
Well, I'm a professional engineer with about 41 years of experience, and I've worked around the world in all kinds of places: Egypt, Russia, Kazakhstan, throughout the United States, Canada. In the last 20 years or so of my career, I was specializing in construction of facilities, buildings in the high Arctic in Nunavut in Canada.
Right.
Throughout that whole 40-year period, I was also involved with a lot of forensic engineering. So we would prepare reports on things that either broke or blew up or fell down or didn't work. And those reports might be used for trial purposes. They might be used for insurance companies or in arbitrations, or in some instances, when we would do a report, the sides would just settle between themselves, depending on what the report came up with.
Right.
So I've had a lot of experience with forensic engineering, which is analyzing things. I've worked in a lot of capacities. I was part of the creation of the 2015 National Building Code and was on the National Research Council's committee there. I've been on various other committees. I'm currently on the Building Advisory Committee. I'm the chairman of that for the government of Nunavut. And again, I've been on international bodies, on boards of directors like the International Concrete Repair Institute. I've been on various charitable organizations on the boards, the Rotary Club, the Vintage Locomotive Society. So I've traveled the world. I've worked in various places. I've worked in probably some of the most challenging places in the world, like Nunavut, for instance. And when we were looking at what was going on in the country and trying to figure out what we should do, we were talking about putting together reports that would quote experts in the world. And the problem, and I saw the problem with that right away, because in the United States you have Supreme Court justices that don't know what a woman is.
So that's very true.
It's unfortunate, but nowadays you can find an expert or a scientist to tell you anything, depending on what you're willing to pay them, I think.
Absolutely.
Now maybe that's a jaundiced way to think about it, but it's the truth. And so when we were considering what to do, based on my experience, and particularly based on the experience of a very smart Winnipeg lawyer.
Right.
Some years ago, I was in a trial with a particular lawyer, and like an old man watching a Sunday football game, I was sitting there going, in my mind, ask this question and ask that question while he was cross-examining a witness.
Sure.
And of course, he didn't ask my super questions that I'd thought of. And so during a break, I said to him, listen, how come you didn't ask this question and that question? They seem obvious ones to me. And he said to me, I'll never ask a question of a witness in court if I already am not positive what his answer is going to be. And so that came to my mind when we were considering what to do here. And I thought to myself, how can we apply this to writing a report? And the answer came that look at what the government of Canada and the provincial governments were saying to us.
Right.
Use their own words. Look at the statistics that they're reporting and analyze what the statistics are actually telling us compared to what the messaging was from the government.
Government and mainstream media.
And mainstream media.
Sure.
So when you look at our report and we start talking about numbers and whatnot, and I hesitate using the word statistics, because as soon as an engineer says statistics, people's eyes roll back in their head.
That's right, yeah.
But it isn't the kind of statistics you might see on some of the mainstream media. It's simple numbers and divisions and subtractions. So when we looked at the government's data and we looked at mortality rates, for instance, we we didn't adjust their numbers. In other words, if they said there were 10 deaths due to COVID, we didn't question the testing. We didn't question the protocol as to how they came up with that, whether they died with or from COVID. We simply used their numbers. So using their numbers and just doing simple arithmetic on them, we thought this is equivalent to, how can they argue this? How can they tell us that they have an expert that will dispute what we're saying? Because it's their own words.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of where I came from and the experience I had to do this, and was kind of the theory behind how we would prepare the report.
Now, they put pressure on everybody to follow the script continuously, and that was something that you would have been faced with all the way along, is, coming up with these numbers from the outside, and you had to do some digging, I imagine. So, in terms of digging for that information, you had to go into a lot of different places. Can you name a few of them as resources?
Well, again, I wanted to make sure that we were in a position that we were using data that the government couldn't argue with. So we didn't go to some of the Statistica sites that you see. We went to Health Canada. We went to the provinces of Manitoba, Ontario so far, and the first report we did was based on Canadian numbers, but there were certain parts of it that were Manitoba.
Right.
So like ICU bed usage and the people we named.
Sure.
And the legislation that we quoted with regard to criminal charges was Manitoban. But since then, we've done a report revised for Ontario. So we kept our sources very focused. We used Health Canada, Statistics Canada, the provinces, and we also did a lot of research on what the provinces knew or what they ought to have known. And more specifically, what I mean by that is it's very difficult to get ICU bed numbers in the provinces.
Oh, yeah.
And so what we did was...
Couldn't even go in and start counting, they wouldn't let you through the doors.
You're right. And so in Manitoba particularly, and it's been unique so far for us, we found studies that the government had done some years ago, and in order to tell them what to do with ICU beds. For instance, the government of Manitoba did a study along with the University of Manitoba in 2011 or 12 on ICU beds in Manitoba in 2006 and 7.
Oh.
So we had those numbers. And we also had the population numbers of Manitoba at the time. And then we watched what the government did. And again, along the way, the government of Manitoba did additional studies. And those studies said, go this way, but they went that way. So the sources that we used in the report were quite narrow, but there was a lot of research we did outside of that in researching studies, etc., Canada-wide and just provincially, which informed us as to what to look for.
That's great. That's exactly what people need to have happen, because I tell you, there's the rhetoric that comes out from the mainstream media, even the government propaganda, whether it's Dr. Tam or whether it's one of our other flunkies throughout the course of the last 2 years, has been telling the same tale. They're reading from the same script, and they continue to, not even answer questions anymore. The questions that are being answered, we know, are blatant lies or flat out propaganda.
Yeah, and they, it's interesting that you say that, because within the last few weeks, I was asked by another group if I would take a look at an article that was carried in the mainstream media. And the article was referencing a study that was done and carried in the Canadian Medical Journal. And the article that came out of mainstream media said this, and they actually referenced the study in the Canadian Medical Journal. But if you read the medical journal, it actually said this. And on top of that, the main researcher behind the study, and it revealed this in the actual report, not in the mainstream media, but in the actual report, it revealed that the main author and the person that they interviewed for their report was conflicted upside, downside, backwards, and forwards. That he worked on the government's COVID
I want to tell the
task
truth,
force.
but I can't.
Yeah. So so I wrote an article. It hasn't come out yet, but it was saying, no, wait a minute. The mainstream media in their article said this, and we quoted it, and then we went to the report and we showed exactly what the report said. And then further to that, we demonstrated that the person who they interviewed was completely conflicted, but the mainstream media never told you that. The report did. It's so you're right. The message not only coming out of the government but out of the mainstream media is I don't want to use the word,
I
allegedly fraudulent.
Yes, right.
You'll notice I put allegedly in there.
I'd like to say possibly criminal.
I believe it is. I believe it is.
So, okay, thank you for that oversight and or overview of what, what makes Ken the way Ken is.
No, that would take a number of psychiatrists and probably a few years of analysis, I think.
Well, the last 2 years, I'm sure this is what makes Ken who Ken is, because this is what you do. You write reports for a living. You've made sure that you've done a great job for a lot of organizations around the world, obviously. Otherwise, you still wouldn't be doing this. So your reports are very, very in-depth. We have an 89-page report here to talk about criminal allegations concerning COVID-19 pandemic response is really what this is about. But in terms, we know how you kind of got here, but your initial reaction to what was going on a personal level, what, something drew you to go farther, something inspired you to go farther. Was it that you saw a sleepiness in Canadians? Was it that you knew that you could prove this?
Well, from the outset, when this happened, I'll be honest, when the COVID pandemic was announced, I was in Mexico at my son's wedding.
Oh, good place to be trapped.
Yeah, in March of 2020. And the announcement came out, and it was incredible. Yesterday it was fine, and it was sunny, and tomorrow you had to get out of Mexico and get home because all of a sudden there was this incredible panic.
Right.
And the way it was presented by the mainstream media and by the government, this thing was a death sentence. Mm-hmm. If you were going to get it, you were going to die.
Yep.
And when you just looked around, nobody was dying.
Nobody was dropping, no.
And frankly, all through 2020, it didn't really happen. So right from the beginning, we had our suspicions that something was wrong. And then in the fall of, I think it was 2021, or in the fall, I think it was in the fall of 2021, I get a panicked phone call from somebody, who I won't name, saying that, the whole medical system was collapsing because ICU beds were completely full of people dying from COVID. And I said, no, this isn't true. And so I actually wrote a report, an earlier report, really for the benefit of that person, about ICU bed usage. And at the time, they were reporting 32 people in ICUs in Manitoba, be either with or because of COVID. And they didn't really define, was it with or because of. And what I mean by that is, if you got in a car accident or you had a heart attack and you went to the ICU and they tested you and you had COVID, they called it a COVID ICU bed. So that was the second thing. When I did an initial report solely on ICU beds and started looking at what was being said by the government. And it was shocking to me at the time, but I kind of put it aside. I wrote that report. It went out to a few people, a few doctors, by the way. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of got set aside. And then what happened, the straw that broke the camel's back, and I know this is going to sound frivolous, but myself and someone else were members for many, many years, decades, were members of a social club here in Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. And all throughout the first year of the lockdowns, we supported them, and we would come in and we would, you couldn't be in the facility, but we would buy things from them and we would support them.
Right.
During the next year of this, when the government said, there's apartheid now, somebody who's taken the experimental genetic treatment can come in your door, and those people that haven't can't. Mm-hmm. And I phoned this social club, and I said to them, listen, guys, you better not do this. You better not go along with apartheid, because a bunch of people who've been supporting you have good reasons not to have taken this experimental drug. And if you shun them, there's going to be consequences. Well, the next day they decided to ignore me, and I guess a few people have done that before. And so we quit. And there was a bunch of us that quit. Yeah. And within a few weeks, this was people couldn't see each other. You couldn't go see grandma. You could phone. So we created our own social club, and we got about 35 people in it, and we started having dinners at our house. Mm-hmm. And after two of those, boy, we had a good time. But someone, and it wasn't me, said, we've got to do more than this. And 5 of us kind of broke off and had a discussion one night about what we were going to do. And that led to the discussions about, let's write a report. And then it led to, these other folks, great people, but having the experience to do a detailed forensic engineering report isn't something that a lot of people, it's not the skill set a lot of people have. So I ended up taking on that role of writing the report.
You're the best man for the job.
Well, I had the experience for the job. So, and of course, people talk, there was something else that happened in that. People talk about, they hear that still small voice inside them.
Yeah.
And they always say, well, I didn't really hear the voice, but I heard it. And, well, that's not true for me. I heard the voice. It's my wife, my still small voice is a 5'4" brunette.
There you go. That's exactly it.
Yeah, she made sure that I was going to do this report. So that was kind of what pushed us in it. But right from the beginning, just by observing what was going on, we knew that there was something the matter.
I'm going to say I think both of us have family that kind of instilled us to take it to this level and have to do what we do today. And it's a good thing.
It's important.
I mean, it is important. People sit back and wonder what their calling in life is, and this just might be ours as an example. Everybody's trying to fit into the puzzle that are awake and find out where they kind of meld into the groups and the clubs and the social gatherings and even how they fit into being a part of a report like yours. You obviously didn't do this alone, so that's something else that our viewers need to know, and that you had a team of individuals who worked with you to provide this information, to get it so it was right, so the research was done properly, and then you knew that you could make these bold statements and not have any criticism coming back at you because you've done your homework, crossed those T's, dotted those I's, and done it right. What do you find the most compelling about the report? Because I know a lot of our viewers are going to go to the website a little later on when we post that, and we'll kind of you could take them through some of the good things, obviously, that are in here. Good in the sense that we figured it out, bad in the sense that this is happening, of course. Yes. But this compelling report, there's some stuff in it that you found, you couldn't get away from it. You had to go back to it. It was very concerning to you. It was the most obscene thing you've seen, and again, what it took it in your mind to be able to put that title on this, criminal allegations, and as soon as you bring that into play, that something, a light switch flipped on and went, this is it, this is why, this is the thing. What was that? What was that one thing that made it go criminal?
Well, part of what drove me into that was being a professional myself. I'm a professional engineer. And as a professional and a member of a professional body, you have certain responsibilities. If I was designing a building and I needed a 12-inch beam, and the government told me, no, we got a lot of 6-inch beams, put the 6-inch in. I couldn't do that. And if it collapsed, I would be criminally responsible.
That's right.
And this is the same thing. When I looked at the statistics, and when you say what stood out to me the most, the totality of the fraud, alleged fraud, the totality of the lies, the totality of the ignoring the facts, that's what struck me. Because when I started researching this, I had no idea where it was going to go. I had no idea when I started the first item of it. And the first thing I started looking at was simply mortality statistics from Statistics Canada. And it's interesting, I did this report in February to March, and we had the statistics for 2020, but it's now July or almost August of 2022, and the government, Statistics Canada, has not released the statistics for last year, for 2021. And some of our subscribers, and we have thousands of subscribers now, but some of our subscribers have written to Statistics Canada and said, where are they?
Yeah, for sure.
And the answer from Statistics Canada, it's coming, it'll be in December. Well, wait a minute. Every other year it was in April or May, and this year, which is probably one of the most important years where folks really want to understand what happened, it's going to be available in December.
Nice and delayed, right?
Nice and delayed.
Nice and delayed, like a Pfizer report or a Moderna report.
Well, at least they didn't try. Yeah, at least they didn't try to stop it from coming out for 75 years.
Exactly right.
So it was the totality, but we we kind of went into this thing, or I went into this thing and I looked at it in a number of different ways. So I looked at mortality rates.
Right.
And I looked at messaging, and how, did the messaging make sense? Was it clear? Because people were using, like ordinary folks like myself, were using the information the government was giving us to make informed decisions as to what to do with their family. So it needed to be clear.
Yeah.
So we looked at that. We also looked at ICU bed usage in Manitoba and availability of those beds, and that was shocking what we found. We looked at the messaging. And this is a little bit different than the first part. We looked at the messaging that the government of Manitoba and government of Canada was giving people to inform them to make decisions. For instance, one of the really shocking things that we found out were what the government was telling people who were contemplating being pregnant or were breastfeeding, in those childbearing years, and the statistics were on their own shocking. But when Pfizer was telling the government was even more shocking, that the government would still be pushing this on women. And then on top of it, we managed to get documents from Pfizer out of a U.S. court order that actually showed us how in February of 2021, they had already reviewed 42,000 adverse events. And the way they carried that out, in my opinion, wasn't even fitting for a middle school child in a science class. It's incredible what they didn't know and incredible what they didn't pursue. And again, that's all in the report, and we can talk a little bit about some of those specifics, whatever you want to do.
Sure. There is just it's kind of overwhelming when you first start to think about everything that's gone on, the manipulation, the coercion, the intimidation. I think for myself, as soon as they started, we had just moved here to Manitoba, and I noticed that back at home, my friends were putting up, you can win $1 million if you get your shot. And, that's where I just went, whoa, now they're paying me to get a shot.
Yeah.
Something's wrong here, right? Like really wrong. And I wasn't prepared to get it prior to that either. But both of our families have suffered along the way and given up things. Mine as well. There's a lot of information that comes from this report where you've woken people. You've taken them from the woke state and awakened them, is what I should have said. But that awoke state now, or that awakened state now, is really is starting to build. Yes. We're starting to see that grow more and more. We're starting to see a little bit of mainstream media starting to, focus in on a couple of other things too. We've seen, doesn't matter whether it's the U.S. the U.S. president or a Canadian prime minister, but both have had COVID.
Yes.
And that being said, obviously we can say from the whole line down that the shots didn't work, and they're getting ready for more. So I don't necessarily need to go back, I guess, into the report as much as we need to talk about the here, the now, the changes that have happened, say, in the last month, because there's been a lot of things that have dramatically changed in the last month. We've seen, I think, more of our Parliament MPs standing up on the Conservative side to say and call out some of this detrimental, effect that the Liberals and NDP are having on our country. We've also seen them stand up to the health regulations, the mandates. They're not so much standing up against the jabs yet. We're not hearing that happen, and we're starting to see a push from not only Health Canada, but we're still seeing other sporting events, per se, like the Niagara Canada Summer Games coming up here next month. They will not drop the shot mandate, and they will not give up on masking.
Yes.
I had a really good conversation with the president and CEO of the Canada Summer Games. We'll be airing that on a different show, of course, but we're still seeing that conformity from a business or a corporate side of things, plus from I guess a federal level that's dictating down to anybody who is government regulated. And with that being said, I think that things are going to get a little more strict as we go forward. There are parents out there concerned about whether school's going to open in September, and there's things like that. But some of the stuff that, like your 89-page report isn't where it, started and stopped. You continue to educate yourself on a daily basis. So does your team. You keep doing more research. Will there be a follow-up report? Maybe I'll ask that question quickly.
Well, probably the first thing that's going to happen is we need to roll out revised reports for each of the provinces. And as I said, we've done one for Manitoba. We've done one for Ontario.
Yep.
But I also want to say that everything in that report is Canada-wide except for the section on ICU beds and the people we named as alleged perpetrators of criminal acts.
Sure.
So it can be used across the country, and it's being used across the country. With regard to what's coming in the future, it's really exciting. It really is. And
you're going to give some hope.
Yes, and that's
Great.
exactly right. You can't imagine how many thousands of people that I've gotten messages from across the country, from Victoria to St. John's. And I've had people crying,
Yep.
telling me that they had lost hope. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. There was no supposed leader standing up and offering hope. It was just,
right.
it was just disaster after disaster after disaster, and folks were losing hope. And one of the things that folks see in this report is and I want to make sure people understand, this is just not another report. We structured this report as a criminal complaint going to the police, but it's also written in such a way that folks can understand it, and we've made it available amongst other tools on our website
Right.
that ordinary people can get involved with. We're not asking anybody in particular to go out there and print 500 copies of the report and go and distribute it to everybody they know, but we are asking you to read it. Don't be overwhelmed. It's 89 pages. There's a lot of graphics in it. We made this, I worded this in such a way that it's very understandable, and there's summaries which are purely graphical, almost cartoonish, where it explains to you the details and the salient points in each one of the sections of the report. So what we're asking, though, is for individuals right across the country, hundreds of thousands of them, millions of them, hopefully, you can print one report, and this week, you can walk down to your MLA's office, your legislator's office, and you can drop it off and say, I've received this and I've got concern about this. You can email it. You can drop it off at your doctor's office. And I do have a funny story about that. You can hand it out to a police officer. And I also have a funny story about that. It's odd how my funny stories always surround my wife. We've provided you with the report. You can download it from our website, thetruefactc19.com. There's appendices that are about 1,000 pages long. You can download those separately. There's another download which is simply just the infographics. It's 10 pages. And you can download that and educate yourself or hang that out. We even have business cards with QR codes on the back. So you can print these. There's a template on the site you can download. You can print off these cards, and there's a lady in Winnipeg who I'll bet you she's given out 10,000 of these cards.
Yeah, just walk through them all.
Absolutely. And it's funny, about 3 weeks ago, my wife was in Saskatchewan driving to Edmonton, and my wife often has a different understanding of the speed limit than most of us do. So eventually she got pulled over by an RCMP officer, and he wrote her a ticket. And when he was finished writing the ticket, my wife reached down into her purse and she said, "Hey, constable, whatever, have you seen this?" And she handed him out a bunch of cards. And he walked away. I don't know if he was shaking his head or not. But, again, we've set this thing up so ordinary folks, ordinary citizens can do something. We've listed the addresses of all the MPs and senators on our site. So you can click, you just roll down the main screen, you can click on it, and there it is. So you can email it, you can print it, you can drop it off, you can give out infographic sheets. And the other part of our website is we have a blog, or it's called News at the top. You click on that and you'll see blog posts coming out almost weekly, or sometimes more than weekly. And they're not just advertising. They're not just more statistics. What they are very often is instructions as to what to do. Right. How do you approach the police and give them? Well, there's a blog post from July which tells you exactly that, and it gives you instructions and tells you what to do, and it asks you to let us know what you've done. And I'm just clicking on that news link right now. And again, you can interviews are on there. There's commentary on there. we gave out certificates of genetic authenticity, and hundreds of people have got those customized for them.
That's great. That's great.
So I want to make sure people understand this isn't just another report. This is a toolkit. This is something that you can use to make a difference. And again, you know what? The police, the senators, the MPs, all of them can ignore Ken Drysdale. Ken Drysdale's not a special person. Maybe my grandchildren think I am, but you know, we set this up so, and with the expectation that thousands and thousands of people will take it up and do something with it. Even if you send one, just send one. Walk down to your MLA's office, walk down to your municipality's office, walk down to your mayor's office and just hand it over and say, I would like this looked at, or walk into your police station. This is something that's made to be grassroots. And I can tell you that if you go to our website and you go down to the bottom, it'll show you, and I'm rolling down there right now, and I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are going to be right now, but you know, I think we're almost at 60,000 people who have come on, unique people who have come onto this website and have been using it. And this website has been up we're just under 50,000. This website has been up since I think it was June 4th or 5th. We have thousands of people who have subscribed to it, and they all get our posts, our news articles. They get to see all the interviews that we're doing and links to that, and it's creating a community. And I answer. Maybe I won't be able to, but in the future. But I answer everyone personally. So when you email us, when you talk to us, you have a supporting community, and we've got some really exciting stuff coming down the pipe. By the way,
that's something that's important as community going forward. There's a lot of people that are like-minded that are starting to. We won't say rally the troops by any means, because I don't think we're that kind of a country. And we the truckers did a great job of maintaining their cool the whole time they were in Ottawa for that month. And if anything could have started, it probably should have started there, but it didn't. And,
yes.
and I'm kind of grateful for that too. It kind of keeps us in a place right now that we're able to still, have people like you who make these analyzations and are able to make up these 89-page reports that, turn into something that are powerful, not only to the 50,000 people that have seen it already, but, to, I guess, really connect. And to get them to wake, they're going to have a little bit of a push.
Yes.
We have been pushed. They have been pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And I think they're looking for some relief. I think they're looking for some stress relief. They thought that the shot was going to be it. They thought that listening to the government was going to be it. Now I think they're starting to panic. I think that they're starting to get a little worried. Well, did we do the right thing? Didn't we do the right thing? Were these conspiracy theorists right? And it wasn't that all of us were conspiracy theorists by any stretch. I think that we just had a sense about us to ask more questions. And that's probably why I'm a journalist first and foremost, is because that's my nature. I want to know more, and I want to find out more. And there's people that are viewing this today who want to know more, and they're going to be able to go to True Facts on C19, and they're going to be able to get that information, and they're going to be able to talk in a way that, again, isn't detrimental to somebody who thinks the opposite way.
Yes.
And those two connectivities, and again, I've said this from day one, it's purely about discussion. And if we don't discuss and we don't have those discussions, if both groups are shut off, we're only spewing rhetoric at each other and the hatred just continues. But if we can get together and we can listen to our side, and they can see that, they can see that 89-page report details some stuff that they don't have a clue about, then, we're going to see results. Overall results that are going to build more and more support. It's like the double mint spearmint commercial where, I saw two friends new and then two more and then so on and so on. And it keeps building. And 50,000 is a great place to be since June the 4th. A month and a bit later, a couple of weeks, that number is going to double by next month and the month after that. And it's just going to keep going up. You're going on lots of programs, Stu Peters, you've been on, all these different programs. And that being said, they're helping.
Yes.
And that push is starting to to generate momentum, I think. And heading forward into the future, you talked a little bit about that. There's a way out of this all. And lots of people are struggling to find that way.
Yes.
Some would like to think aggression and strength and, aggressive action with, the whole let's go get these people and lock them up. Others want to wait for the court system. And, we've had that discussion prior to us sitting down today. And in the court system, do you want to get into that a little bit? Because I think that that's an important fact. I mean,
Yes.
I was with Action for Canada for 2 years and just kind of followed their plan and tried to, do some of the things that they were suggesting we do. NOLs were one, following it up with a Form 2 and trying to get in with criminal intent, that's where it kind of halted. And it halted not because we didn't know what we were doing or anybody didn't try. It came down to we were going to get blocked by the prosecution and the judge that was sitting there in that hearing.
Yes.
And if you can't get past the hearing, you can't get to court. Now, friends of mine in Alberta have stated, quite commonly that, they took tickets, they held rallies, they got fine tickets, and they, one had $15,000 worth of fines from the rallies that he did at $5,000 a rally. He's fighting those tickets, and as it turns out, courts are closed. He drove to High River for that hearing. He drove to Lethbridge courtroom to go for that hearing. Courts are closed. He couldn't get in the doors. So that being said, our judicial system is kind of at a place of struggle right now. And let's face it, they're supposed to be working for us. And unfortunately, they work for each other.
Yes.
And that has led to some real turmoil here in our country about how to take something like your document into the criminal charges place. What can be done? What can we do to help make sure that you guys get going in the right direction on a criminal level? Or what can we do? I mean, even myself with a Form 2, I'd still like to be able to present those Form 2s and get into hearing and get past the hearing to trial and, make some of these people be held accountable for the things that they've done just for my own family.
Yes. Well, I hate to say it, but it's the truth. All of our institutions have become politicized, from the policing to the government always was, to the legal system. And I didn't say judiciary on purpose. I have a thing about that. Mm-hmm. There's justice.
Yes.
And there's laws.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not the same.
No.
We don't have a justice system in this country anymore. We have a system of laws. And we did an interesting commentary on that on our blog post just a week or so ago, and we talked about, here it is, we talked about Lady Justice, and what is justice, and what are the symbols in justice, mm-hmm. and what have we been delivered in this country as of late.
Right.
And so when I say things have become politicized, the only way to counter that is to be political. And how can Ken Drysdale can't be political on his own. I can give speeches and I can stand up and do shows, but it's irrelevant.
Right. Yeah.
I'm one voice. But what we've done with this report and this website is we've given every single citizen in this country the opportunity to do something. Mm-hmm. And I know this for a fact, every single MP in Ottawa and the senators have gotten this report hundreds of times already. Hundreds of times.
Right.
And their response to it has been evolving. And when it's only hundreds of times, they can still evolve. Mm-hmm. We had a lady from, I think she was from Victoria last week, told me she emailed it to her senator. And I'll remind viewers, the senators are working for you. You're paying their salary and their pensions.
Right. That's right.
And the response she got back from her senator was, I don't open attachments.
Oh.
I don't open attachments. When that senator starts to get 10,000 of these from 10,000 voters, and that MP gets it 100,000 times, and I can tell you that these reports have been hand-delivered to MPs. Pierre Poilievre was in Winnipeg 3 weeks ago, and I attended the evening.
Right.
But then there was a smaller lunch meeting the next day. There were only 25 people there. And we had one of our subscribers there who sat next to Mr. Poilievre, and he had a quill ring-bound copy of the report, and he spoke to him. And Mr. Poilievre was very polite, and he talked to him about it, and he handed him the report. And Poilievre committed to read that report and understand what it was. Now, we haven't heard anything from him, but I do want your viewers to know that this thing is being hand-delivered to people. We have lobbyist groups, industry groups who are very concerned about what's going on, and they've lent their Ottawa lobbyists to us, and so it's being delivered by hand. It's going by registered mail. It's being dropped off at constituency offices. And the only way we're going to be able to counter the political judiciary is with politics. And for us, politics are 10 million Canadians or 15 million Canadians. They can't ignore that. Now, in addition to that, we've also found, and it's incredible, that our MPs, who are, again, our employees, who are ignoring us. There's been a group of us in my riding, which is Interlake, and Mr. Bazan is the MP there, and many of us have been writing emails to him about this and sending reports to him, and he's been ignoring us. As a matter of fact, I was hopping mad the day when in my opinion, the illegal aggression by the government against the truckers started, where they were pepper spraying peaceful protesters. And in the mail that day, and I hadn't heard from my MP ever, but in the mail I got a beautiful color brochure from Mr. Bazan talking to me about Trudeau inflation, where we hadn't, and it must have cost, I have no idea what it cost to print out thousands and thousands
20 grand.
of 20 grand he
20
spent.
grand, yeah.
And I have to say, you might call me childish, but when I was at the Poilievre rally, and having tried to get a hold of Bazan, along with many other people in the riding, here he steps out and does an introduction of Mr. Poilievre. And I forgive me for this, I was in the background, I yelled, "Where have you been the last 2 years?"
Oh, there we go.
And a lot of the crowd, kind of went, because people have been trying to get a hold of him. Matter of fact, we did a news post on this, one of our most popular news posts, which we titled Missing. And we had a picture of Mr. Bazan on there and a missing brochure, or a missing header on it. So
he's been kind of irrelevant for the last little bit, and then all of a sudden Poilievre's coming to town, and I better step up, eh?
Well, he better step up because there's value in it to him. He's not stepping up for his constituents. I'm just looking for the post, but he's not stepping up for his constituents at all. But he's stepping up to be in the limelight with Mr. Poilievre.
We call that narcissism.
Oh, there's the post.
All right.
So.
Put his face front and center.
Yeah.
You see him shopping tomorrow. You make sure you make mention you saw him on this show.
Yeah. Have you seen this man? Well, we haven't. Our constituents. And so what we've been talking about there, and I think this is frightening for the MPs. It won't take much in each riding. If we could organize 5,000 voters, 10,000 voters in each riding, and present that as a solid political face to these MPs and demand that they come and see us in person 4 times a year, and they report to us what they're doing, and they bring up what we want. It won't take much. It'll only take 5 or 10,000 in each riding, and we're starting to organize that now. We've been speaking within the community that we're in, and we've been talking about that. We'll make an announcement shortly.
Sure.
But again, unfortunately, we will not succeed at this by just taking the traditional judicial route. Here's an obvious report, and it's got obvious facts in it. You need to investigate it. They've been politicized. And so the way to get this to work is to become political. I'm getting emails from 75-year-old, 85, almost 75-year-old, 75-year-old or 85-year-old grandmothers and great-grandmothers in Penticton, telling me what their experiences are, and how their family won't talk to them anymore, but how their children are still getting this disease, and they're feeling lost. But now they've got a purpose, and they're making prints of this thing. And it was interesting. I got an email from another lady. I can't remember where she was from now. She asked me she wasn't very. astute computer-wise, so she asked me if I would send her a printed copy of it, which
Sure.
I did.
Yeah.
And then I got an email from her shortly after. She says, I was going to make copies of that report, and I went to the local Staples, and I handed it to them, and I wanted 10 copies or something. And she said, as she walked away, she thought to herself, they're probably not going to print it because apparently
Copywriting.
Not copywriting,
Oh, no?
but the content. Apparently, Staples, according to this lady, has been censoring content.
Oh.
And so she had
Really?
tried to get some things done previously.
Oh, I'm going to Staples this afternoon now, and I will definitely be taking a copy of this to see whether or not that policy is in place. And then I'll
Exactly.
follow up with Staples themselves on that story.
Yeah.
Thank you for that tip.
Yeah, so she went away full well thinking she was going to come back in an hour or two and they wouldn't have printed it. Well, when she got back, the person that was working behind the desk said to her, I was reading this and I can't believe it. I'm converted. So we converted one there and she got her copies made. But,
That's great.
And again, I can't emphasize this more strongly. The website isn't just something you go down and look at some cool stuff. It's a toolbox.
Yeah.
Use it as a toolbox. How much effort is for you to download the template that we've created for you for business cards? It prints the business cards back and forwards, and you can buy templates, or you can just print it on paper and cut them out, and put some in your purse or in your pocket. And when you're having a conversation, here. When you walk by a bulletin board, tack it up.
Yeah.
Give it to people. Walk into it's not that intimidating. Walk into your representative's office and hand it to the secretary. I want it, and take down their name and let us know.
We were talking about MPs. Bazan is one of them. Rachel Danshaw's been a big time supporter of things going on and trying to make a difference. I've seen some of her speeches in the House during debate. Where's your take on that? Do we have that support, or is that just
we
not
don't.
there at all?
Someone came to me particularly about Rachel a few months ago because she's new in Parliament and she's been saying all the right things. But we sent this thing to her, and interesting, and we got back this templated email. How busy she is and she can't get to all of us and da. And anyway,
I've requested for an interview as well, and I couldn't get one.
Well, it's funny though, we kind of put that aside, but then we started getting an exact same narrative from people right across Canada, and the emails they were getting from their MP, same email.
Same script.
So they've distributed these emails to try to shut up the constituents.
Okay, that's interesting, because now we're going to go back to the script, because the script is what's going to hopefully lead us to criminal charges down the road. So the script. This script isn't just coming out of Ottawa.
No.
This script is coming from a world international level, and I'm not going to tiptoe around it, and I'm sure you've already, is that mentioned in there? No.
We stayed out of the politics of it.
You stayed out of that. But realistically, we aren't being run by our own government. We are being run and led by our government, yes, in that regard, but they're being led by somebody else, which is an external force. And I'll say it out loud, and am I okay to say it with you in your presence?
Sure.
I mean, I'm the one saying it, but the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is not going to go away until we deal with them and handle them. I've done several reports on the show about the WEF, about Klaus specifically, about how Justin is a double agent for them, and I will blatantly call him that, and I have no qualms about doing that. Actually, you want to see one of our other reports where he's wearing the striped white and black jumpsuit with a pair of Bob Barkers on his feet. But to get there, that's the interesting part. They're going to keep meeting every single year in Switzerland, and they're going to keep their nice little country of Switzerland vaccine free. They're going to keep them COVID free. And the world is just a happy place in Switzerland. But the rest of the world, oh boy, it's the worst thing in the world. And we're going to change that. We're going to take over all the farmland. We're going to make sure that we do all the damage to the people. In all reality, you see the same thing possibly. I'm going to ask you this question, and if you don't agree, I understand. But population reduction, where do you sit on that situation?
Well, it's interesting because you talked about a bunch of things, and population reduction is one of them. And when you see the policies that they've been putting in, not just in Canada, but around the world, they're talking about fertilizer reduction in the Netherlands and what that will do to the food production. And now
30%, he just announced,
That's
30%
right.
is coming out of Canada. That's going to be destructive and detrimental to our farming industry, our own processing, our own working, everything.
That's absolutely right. But this has been in the works for many, many, many years. In all aspects, these people have been planning this for a generation or more. You know, and I'm going to go a little off of topic, but I'll bring it back along. When I was a young man, which
Plus goes back to 71. And before that, it goes back even farther to the 40s and the 30s.
But you know, when I was a young man, every town, every city had their own independent media. You know, I grew up in just outside of Winnipeg, and there was a local newspaper in Stonewall.
Yep.
And there was a local newspaper in Toulon.
Toulon Times.
Toulon Times and Stonewall Argus.
That's correct.
And Winnipeg had 2 or more independent newspapers. Now, they did carry some of the stuff from the Reuters and whatnot, but there was real news in there. It was being real research by real people in the community, and they were responsible to the community. Then that started to consolidate. Despite the fact that there's what's called anti-combines legislation in Canada, I found out that anti-combines, which is meant to stop monopolies from developing, I find that that anti-combines legislation only applies to people like me.
That's right.
And I know folks who own medium Canadian companies who have tried to buy operations in a particular city and been denied it under the Canadians Anti-Combine Act. Mm-hmm. But what about Rogers?
That's
what
like
about
Shaw.
Bell and Shaw?
Absolutely.
And what about all the newspapers in Canada?
They were bought up.
Exactly.
I agree.
Where was the anti-combines legislation there? And it's not just media. Again, when I was a young man, we used to have the big Canada Packers plant in Winnipeg.
Right, yeah.
And now it's not. And now there's a giant factory that produces a great deal of the meat in Edmonton.
Right.
What happens if something goes down there? What happens if there's a strike or a fire? We don't have food?
We've seen that happen all across the U.S. of late.
We have.
We're just waiting for it to start here. I mean, what happens in the States seems to, spill over into Canada a little bit. We start to see some of the same things. Obviously, our Prime Minister brings some of that with him when he sees an event happen in the States. He likes to bring that propaganda back here and try to implement that on us. We saw that with the guns as an example.
Well, that's an interesting one. Now, this is very controversial, and people might say, why the heck is this on my website? But it is. On our website, given what we found, given that we found out that the government messaging on the COVID was misleading and, in my opinion, fraudulent. Mm-hmm. When this latest attack on guns came out, we decided, and again, we didn't know what we were going to find, we decided to look into it. And on our website, there's an infographic that talks about gun safety versus vax safety. And again, I don't want to get into a political argument about guns, but this is just the numbers. And what's displayed on the screen there beside me is our infographic on guns. And if you listen to the government, you would think that, and they say it, that the homicides using handguns, shotguns, and rifles has been going up and up and up. The government's way to come up with that was the same way they used with regard to excess mortality in Canada, and that is, by strict numbers, the number of homicides is going up, but the population of Canada is increasing 750,000 people a year. So the homicides would go up. Anything else, cancer would go up. And as a matter of fact, according to Statistics Canada, the homicides using firearms per 100,000 population is exactly the same today as it was in 2000. So for 21 years or more,
and consistent.
It's the exact number. I think it's 0.2 something or other per 100,000.
Well, wait a minute now. That would lead me to say that are they just bumping numbers year after year, or is there a legitimate count? Is Statistics Canada doing their jobs?
They are, but you see, the messaging has been lying to you. And Statistics Canada actually reports the number of homicides per 100,000, and you'll see, and there's a link on this page that I'm displaying right now.
Right.
But it gets worse than that.
It does.
So we looked at this, and in 2020, according to Statistics Canada, there were 276 homicides using handguns, rifles, and shotguns in Canada. 276.
Wow.
Of those, that's 38 million people, a population. Of those 276, 118 of them were professional hits. Gang-related, I don't want to use the other mob-related thing,
Right.
but mob-related, gang-related sex. So out of 276, 118 of them were gang-related hits.
We don't have a gun problem in Canada.
No.
We have a crime. Well,
We have
criminal problem.
We have a criminal problem. And do you think those gang-related hits are going to stop because they took away your shotgun?
not likely.
Now, we didn't stop there. It's really interesting. Then what we did was we looked at, again, from Statistics Canada, as of May 2022, Statistics Canada reported that there were 339 deaths in less than a year due to the COVID vaccine. So
So everybody's staying at home. Everybody's getting agitated. Everybody's getting antsy because they're stuck at home, and there's still not more murders.
right. I mean, so according to Statistics Canada, there were 123% more vaccine-related deaths than there were gun-related deaths. If you take out the professional hits,
Yeah.
because that's got
Nothing to do with it. That's
Then
right.
it was 214%. So the number of people that, according to Statistics Canada, died of vaccine were 214% higher than the number of ordinary Canadian citizens that died from homicide due to shotguns, rifles, or handguns. And yet, we're banning these guns. And again, I'm not wanting to get into that, but I'm just showing you how they have been lying to you all the way along.
Right.
And changing the numbers or telling you the numbers in such a way to support a completely false narrative. And this was just something that, when they started to announce all these gun policies, we thought, I wonder what the truth is. And so we just looked at the numbers.
That's fantastic. And again, you're proving the point that they continue to mislead. And again, that script, like I said earlier, is being written from the WEF level. It's funneled down. It's not just in our country. That same script is being utilized all around the world in multiple countries. We've seen what happened in Sri Lanka recently. We've seen, allegedly the banks have gone down in China, and I won't speculate there. I'm thinking that they have, and there's been enough propaganda or enough video footage and enough stories coming out of China now that have leaked, that have shown those tanks parked in front of the banks. Your future prediction in Canada, where are we headed? What are we going to do? How are we going to either disrupt their evil plan, or how are we going to criminally take them to criminal phase? In the old days, court would have been thrown out for treason like this. It would have been a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Right now, right here. Sri Lanka was a great example of overtaking and overthrowing your country.
Yes.
And not that I would suggest that by any means on my show for any Canadians to partake in or be involved with or do. But at the same time, that is something that we did see results from that. We've seen a change now. Is it going to be for the better? Where do they pick up? They have to rebuild government. They have to rebuild infrastructure. They have to rebuild commerce. We're going to be in possibly the same sort of situation if we continue to allow this to go forward. So the script is written by them. We need to disrupt their script. We need to call them out, much like your 89-page report does every single moment of the way. And you give Canadians a reason to read the report, to be able to use the wording that's necessary, to be able to carry a conversation with somebody who is still sleeping, and be able to get that message to them that they may obviously then have to. They're almost, once you take a look at a couple of paragraphs and a couple of pages, you're going to go, I need to know more.
Yeah.
And once you're enthralled into that, I think you're gripped, and you're going to get into it a whole lot farther, and we're going to see a lot more people starting to come alive. But our future, I've heard about people buying property up north. I've heard about people buying property in the States. I've seen people that have actually turned around and bought their own citizenship in other countries for $250,000 for them and their families, just so they can get out of Canada, because they don't feel it's going to be going in a positive direction at any time soon, and that it's going to go too far, and we're all going to be stuck. Do you feel like we're stuck?
No, I think it's in my heart. I think it's up to Canadians. It's up to every single one of you. It's up to the guy working on an oil rig. It's up to the grandmother playing with her grandchild. It's up to the doctors, and we could talk about that, and the police, because
Right.
I have a certain opinion on that, which I've voiced lately. If the Canadian people fundamentally, grassroots-wise, don't start doing something, and we've given them tools to do something, if they don't take this in hand, they will lose their country. You know, this has been in the works for a long, long time. And we did a post just a little while ago. People were saying to me, "Well, Ken, you've been at this now for a whole long, long time, and it hasn't changed." And I said, "Wait a minute, we've been at this for about a month and a half, and we did a post on it showing what we've done, where it's going. It's in our blog or our news group. This is up to Canadians. When I look around the country, it's a lot of small things they did. Look at our leaders. Look at some of our medical leaders. Dina Henshaw, Chief Medical Officer in Alberta. She was in court not that long ago being cross-examined by Leighton Gray. And when she was asked for the data that she used in order to determine what policy should be in Alberta, and she's getting paid $400,000 a year or $500,000 a year, her response was, "I just followed Ontario and BC." Are these the kind of leaders that we want?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I say no, number one, and I also say that the BC health minister was also in court with Dina Hinshaw that same day.
Yep.
So while she passed the buck off to her, let's say they obviously put the BC health minister on the stand, and who did she pass the buck off to? Ottawa, Dr. Tam, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's really interesting, because folks don't know this. It's in the report, and it's in the appendices if you want to read it. Canadian government did a 661-page study in 2006 called the Canadian Influenza Pandemic Plan. Theresa Tam was the main author. There were 9 pages of listed contributors to that, and our good medical leader in BC was one of those. She was the medical officer in Toronto at the time. And in the first part of that report, that 661-page report, they described what would happen in an influenza pandemic. And you know what? It was almost textbook what they said happened here. And then they had all kinds of recommendations: masking, quarantines, antivirals. And what they actually did in 2020 and 2020 was the opposite of what they recommended in that report.
Well, that's interesting, because in 2000, the Emergency Management Agency Preparedness Plan was the one that came out. There was a section in that, a couple of paragraphs, no, pardon me, a couple of chapters that had a pandemic plan.
Yes.
Now, who or what organization do you think was responsible for not implementing what was previously planned?
Well, it was the federal government and the provincial medical officers who, for instance, in the Canadian Influenza Pandemic Plan, they identified 2 specific antivirals, and I'm not a doctor, and I can't remember the name. The names are complicated.
That's all right.
And I believe, somebody could check me on this, but I believe that the federal government spent $28 to $30 million stockpiling those antivirals. We didn't use them. The Canadian Influenza Pandemic Plan said, don't use masking. They said, don't quarantine. And there's reasons for it. I believe it's in Section 7. And again, we've reprinted, we haven't changed them. We've actually screenshot those sections, and it's in our 89-page report. And it shows you exactly what they said and exactly what they did. And it was the opposite.
Well, that is so much contradiction, so much hypocrisy. There's just so many lies. And the lies are starting to come out. And as Canadians, this country is founded on immigration. This country is here, I'm here, you're here because our great-grandparents left their countries to come here for a better life. To get here, to have this happen during our lifetime, we never saw this coming. We never expected it. I didn't think it would, I would see a World War III, as some are calling it today. It's a pretty quiet World War III at the moment.
At the moment.
And that's something to take into account too. One of the things that I noticed from your website was that you've had a discussion with an individual who brings with him, I believe, some credibility, some real influence. I think that he has an ability to lead because he has been a leader before. And you know I'm talking about Lieutenant Colonel Rogers out of the United States. He's been vocal on a couple of programs. Obviously, he was on Shadow Davis's show, which is a great podcast here in Winnipeg, and I recommend that all of our viewers check out Shadow's show. Yeah. He's been on Joe Rogan. You know, he's been everywhere. So how do we, you've had the pleasure of communicating with Mr. Rogers and doing your own show with him. And, you know, what there's a plan coming up from down south too. And, you know, that plan expects, you know, Mr. Rogers has been saying it's coming sometime in November. Is that still something that you see as part of the future here?
I've heard some rumors on that, and it may very well, and I have had some discussions, high-level discussions with Lieutenant Rogers on that.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that folks aren't sitting on their tails waiting for someone to come to the rescue. You will rescue us, each and every one of you. And I know I sound like a broken record, but it's true. If Canadians don't rise up, yep, don't expect our cousins and neighbors from down south to come to our rescue. No, they're going to do what they're going to do, and it'll spill over like it spills over. Anything the United States does spills over into Canada. I mean, there are 320 or 330 million people there. Yep. But don't wait for that, you guys. You need to be doing something. And like I said, it doesn't have to be. I don't expect you to turn your life upside down and print out 10,000 as reports. Print out one. Print out one and trot down to your constituency office and give it to them and say,
do something.
Do something. And I want your name. You know, get their name and send it to us. You know, one of the things that we've been finding is the reaction we've been getting from police has been really interesting. And we have a procedure for approaching the police. If some people aren't comfortable doing that, they're supposed to work for you. You should be comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've had, we came that close to having high-level meetings with the City of Winnipeg Police and the RCMP. And RCMP, in the end, our contact, who's an ex-police officer, phoned them to do the final setup, and the contact said, I'm out. Yeah. That didn't come from that person. Yeah. And the City of Winnipeg Police, it's even comical. So we submitted it to them. We had discussions with a very high-level police officer who said to us, excellent report. And we said, okay, we want a meeting with you guys. Okay, well, we can arrange that in a week. And a week went by and 2 weeks went by, and we got a hold of them again. And they said to us, well, you know, we've discovered that Mr. Drysdale isn't a resident of the City of Winnipeg, so he can't make a complaint to the City of Winnipeg Police. Wow. And we said, are you kidding? So if I'm walking down the street and I witness a murder because I don't live in Winnipeg, I have to just keep walking? And so, but it doesn't end there. The irony doesn't end there. Well, first off, I just want to let the City of Winnipeg Police know, and I know they already know this because they've told me they're monitoring my communications, and they told me that we have about a dozen ex-police officers who are going to sign that complaint now.
Excellent.
RCMP and City of Winnipeg Police. So that'll be coming in the next week or so. Just giving you a heads up. But having told me that I couldn't bring charges to the City of Winnipeg Police because I'm not a resident. Mm-hmm. But a week later, I get a phone call from Major Crimes Division, City of Winnipeg Police, and they're asking me, do I know anything about someone somewhere had delivered our reports to someone that was sensitive, and they want to know if I knew anything about it. And I thought to myself, I didn't say it. I should have said it, but I thought to myself, wait a minute, you're asking me for evidence on something that you say happened in Winnipeg when a week ago you told me that I couldn't submit evidence of a crime in Winnipeg?
That's right.
Anyway, so we're still working on that, and like I said, the report is now going in under the signature of several ex-police officers in the city. And
well, I know I have a few police officers who watch the show, so you're speaking directly at them at this moment, and I bet that those kind of guys are if they're watching the show, we know that they're somewhat like-minded. So, you know, they need that little push over the edge. Guess what? This 89-page report does that. Ken is happy to talk to you anytime and have that conversation, I'm sure, right?
And we've got an information session coming up for for police officers who want to know what's going on and want to have a frank discussion, and that should be arranged in the next week or so. One of our police officer contacts is pulling that together for us.
Well, you keep me abreast of that, and I'll make sure to get it on the next show that I do too, and keep them all up to date. And good.
Absolutely. So a lot of exciting things coming on. We're talking about our own show coming up as well, and it'll probably be a bi-weekly show. It'll be interactive. It'll be entertaining. It'll be a lot of news, and it's going to be for rallying folks, ordinary Canadians rallying together. What do you do? And it's looks like it's going to be hosted by my lovely wife Rosalie and another retired police officer who I haven't asked permission to let the folks know about who that is yet. But so that's coming down the pipe, because we really need also not just rallying individual Canadians, but we need to start bringing smaller groups together.
That's correct.
You know, the groups now, there's a lot of coming together. There's some infighting, and it's an interesting phenomena. You know, people will be infighting about some small item. They'll agree on 98% of everything, but then they'll disagree and they'll bash each other over 2%.
I've been watching that happen. Action for Canada is a good one. Stand for Thee is another one. They go back and forth all the time. They both got mixed messages. And again, you're absolutely correct. And I say this, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We have to come together. We have to create a larger umbrella, but that umbrella at the top doesn't need to be directed by one individual or one organization or one group. It needs to be led by an equal spread of we're all under this one platform. And you know what? I'm going to tell you right now, this 89 pages is something to get behind. And I believe that could be something that if they would accept on both platforms, that you would see that them going forward. I'm going to tell you, Stand for Thee. I watched some of their stuff. They were talking about the same sort. They presented the same sort of a presentation out of the States. You're not the only one saying this. Yeah. That's the interesting thing. Others have done reports on their own and studies on their own, and they're concluding that yours is right there with theirs, and it's bang on. And it's not like you took his and stole his information, or he took yours and stole yours. It's like two different sets of, great writers sat down and said, how do we formulate all this research into, that wonderful document that it is.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of the groups that you've mentioned have adopted our package, and they've Action for Canada has a whole page on us with all of our links and whatnot, and Police for Freedom, same thing, and there's Canadian COVID Care Alliance.
Support's generating and mounting.
Yes,
but are you prepared to be that leader of that umbrella? And there has to be somewhat of it's not so much a leader to dictate, but it's a leader to organize so that the group below doesn't start going and bickering and scrapping, and they got to come together.
That's the intent. And I've been given marching orders from my still small voice at home who says that if our group, when our group evolves into that she's in total support of me on that, and so we will be there. And, we're doing little things. We're doing large things. We've got some exciting things coming up. You subscribe to us. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't like it, you can unsubscribe. We will never ask for a donation, and we will never ask you to buy anything.
It's not about the money,
It's not about money. We're not taking any donations. This has all been self-financed. The initial report when we sent it out to all of the MPs, there were 4 or 5 of us in our original group who self-financed that, all the postage and stuff. And now I've been self-financing the rest of it. And again, this is not about money. We will not take donations. We do not take any kind of fan. We're not selling you anything. You don't like it, you can get off. But subscribe, read through, do it with an open mind. Do it little bits at a time so you're not overwhelmed, because this is going to hit you. This is going to come at you, And I'll give you an example, just a quick example, because I know we're running low on time. Mm-hmm. The government told us that if you were over 70 years of age and you got COVID, it was like a death sentence. We compared the mortality rates for various age groups between 2019 and 2020. And in 2019, if you were 70 years of age and older in Canada, you had a 1 in 32 chance of dying. That's the facts. Mm-hmm. 1 in 32. In 2020, that same age group had a 1 in 324 chance of contracting COVID and dying of COVID.
Out of zero.
Right. So your chances of just dying were 10 times higher than your chance of dying of COVID. Now, we didn't explore, did you die with COVID or did you die of COVID? But those are the numbers, and we looked at pregnant women, for instance. Your chance of, if you were a Canadian woman, 20 to 39 years of age in Canada, your chance of just dying was like 1 in 1,700 or 1 in 1,800. Your chance of getting COVID and dying, 1 in 250,000. You know how they're giving it to your kids now? Your chance, if you're 19 years of age and younger in 2019, of dying for any cause in Canada was about 1 in 6,000. Your chance of getting COVID and dying were 1 in 4 million. And again, we didn't question. So those are the kinds of numbers that we're talking about. And those are the kinds of things that I find quite shocking.
Yeah, the manipulation.
Yeah,
and the numbers themselves.
Yeah, so I'm warning you, when you read this thing, and you can confirm the numbers, you don't have to take my word for it. As a matter of fact, don't take my word for it. We've had people, this report has been read tens of thousands of times, and we've had people saying, I get an email, can you misspelled the word on page 46? And we've reacted to that, and we've corrected the word spelling. I think we're on revision 5 right now on the report. We've had small things and we've had larger things that good folks and citizens of Canada have brought to our attention and we fixed, because together we're going to make this thing better.
That's exactly right. That is exactly it. You nailed that on the head. We have to stick together.
Absolutely.
And Canadians always have, and I think Canadians always will. I can't say enough about you coming on the show today. You have been an eye-opener for some. Others are going to go, holy cow, I got to look at that. Yeah. Others are going to go, I got to show somebody that. That was really what I wanted to try to get across here today, was that this is so much more than just a report.
Yes.
And that the documentation has been backed, verified, and double-checked, and everything that you're stating is legit. And for nobody to be taking this to heart except Canadians, other than our parliament and our police forces and our judicial system, and the list goes on, anybody that's involved with government seems to be missing the boat. I can't believe that every single person that we've elected into power has been bought out by this process. And I'm going to say that blatantly because we should be following the money. Did you follow the money in any of this?
No.
Okay, but that's another report, isn't it?
That can be another report. There's only so many hours in the day, I get emails from across the country, and the other day I got an email from someone said, "Is there a Quebec report yet?" And I said, "Well, we've done Manitoba and we've done Ontario," and they said, "There's more provinces in the country than Manitoba." And I said, "Listen, I'm one person," and then they went, "Sorry."
Yeah, I bet. Ken Drysdale for Prime Minister one day?
I don't think so. Ken Drysdale for best grandpa, I think.
Rosalie might make a great First Lady.
Oh, she would make a great First Lady.
There you go. So, well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate having you here. And, all the best, continued success. We're going to put the link in on the comments section so that people can get here. We're going to make sure that we continue to funnel our efforts towards making sure that everything that you're showing with your 89-page report is there for people to not only understand, but to hold close to them and know that the truth is out there, and that we have a chance and a power in strength in numbers. And it's not strength as in let's go beat down the doors. It's strength as in more voices, more people talking. And again, communication is going to be the thing that probably gets us through everything that we're facing. And as we head towards another election, I'm hoping that most people out there have a plain sense of mind to, want to say that your report leads them to not go down the path that we've already been down, to not allow this tyrannical leader that we have to continue to do the injustices that he's doing. And again, possibly have you back for another show. There's COVID camps set up all across our great nation, sitting there and standing by and waiting for us for the future here. And There's some interesting things going on with those camps, and I think that that's going to be something that I cover, and I'm sure you're going to be continuing to learn and investigate on too. But none of this happens without guys like you stepping up, and volunteers like your team, individuals who have the knowledge, the experience, and still maintain a level-headedness that can show a result of hope and outcome versus despair, because we probably have enough on that on a daily basis already just by watching mainstream media. They just don't realize it yet.
Yeah, just don't watch mainstream media.
You got it.
You can't. It's all lies. If you're wondering whether they're lying to you, if they're speaking, they're lying to you.
With that, that's it. Wake Up Canada News. Thanks for watching. Ken Drysdale, thanks for being here. All the best, and we'll tune in again soon. Take care.